Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Naomi, and today I want to give you a few tips for how to sit on the floor more comfortably, sort of like I am right now. So in particular, I want to teach you how to sit cross-legged on the floor. So with your ankles or your shins crossed in front of one another in a way that doesn't make your knees hurt or your low back hurt, and in a way that makes it actually a little bit easier for you to get up to stand. Now, there are a couple of things that you might want to have to make it a little easier for you to sit on the floor. So I have two yoga blocks with me, two sort of, basic size foam yoga blocks, pretty thick and durable. You'll be using those, or you have the option to use those. You also could use pillows. So if you have a couch or chairs that have pillows, you can grab some of those pillows instead. And you might want to have a blanket of some kind as well to give you a little bit more elevation. Okay? So all that said, let's get started. Now, a couple of things too to keep in mind before thinking about, what makes it easier for you to sit on the ground, either cross-legged or in any other way, is that you do want to have hips that have more mobility to them. So toward the end of what we do today, I'll show you a few things to help increase that mobility. But for now, I want to show you a few ways to make it easier for you to sit on the ground. Okay, so first things first, if you go to cross your legs, what happens to most people who have a lot of restriction in their hips is that their knees hike way up. And I'll even take my shirt off, my plaid shirt, so you can see that when the knees hike up, you kind of like round back and it's really, really uncomfortable and your hip flexors feel tight and your head goes forward. Okay, so one of the first things that you can do to make it easier is just to sit on something on the floor. Okay, so for that, I have my blanket or one of the pillows, and I'll show you both. Okay, so if I take this blanket, and you could use a towel if you have towels, doesn't have to be a yoga blanket, okay, but I have my blanket and I fold it over. So if you went to a yoga studio, this is usually how you'd see a blanket on the pile. Okay, I would take it like that and then fold it over. And you could fold it over cleanly or give it a little lip. I usually give it a little lip. That means a little bit of a stair step, so it's not completely even. Part of that is habit. Part of that is it gives you a little bit more angle. So all you're going to do is take that blanket and slide it underneath your hips. Okay? And when you slide it underneath your hips, the first thing that it does is just elevates your pelvis a little bit so it tilts your pelvis more forward. Okay, now you can sit anywhere on this blanket, but sitting somewhere toward the middle or toward the front of it is going to give you more lift. If you sit all the way toward the back, it's fine and will still give you a little bit more lift, but it's going to be more even. Okay, if I sit more toward the front, right, which means that my knees aren't quite as supported, it's going to angle my pelvis more forward, okay, the top of my pelvis more forward, which in turn then allows my low back, my lumbar spine, to draw in and up, which gives me a lot more support than when it's rounding back and my knees are super hiked up. Okay, so that's from the side, and I'll show you too from the front. It doesn't look, like what you're seeing from the front. It's not going to be, necessarily any more exciting, right? But the difference between, no blanket, okay, knees might be a little bit hiked up versus sliding that blanket right underneath your hips, right underneath your booty. Okay, that's going to allow me to tilt forward a little bit more, okay? Now, that might not solve the problem of your knees quite so easily. Actually, I'll stay pointed forward because I think this is going to be a little bit easier to see. Okay, you can take your blocks, I'll show with the pillows as well. You can take those blocks and just slide them underneath your thighs and your calves. So not really underneath your knees, right? Underneath the knees doesn't support you where you need to be supported. Where you really need the support is more underneath your thighs. And that means that your legs don't have to work so hard with your ankles crossed, okay, or with your shins crossed, depending on how far the cross of your legs goes. Okay, so if you're sitting here and your legs are supported by these wonderful blocks, it's so nice because now you get that lift with your spine because of the blankets, but you also have a little bit more support for your knees, and so you don't have to work so hard at the seat. Okay, now from the side, this is what it would look like. So again, this is with the blanket and with blocks. So you might still have your knees kind of hiked up a little bit if there's tension in your hips, even with the blanket, in which case you would take these blocks right underneath your thighs to give yourself more support. Again, you don't want them underneath your knees. right? Because underneath your knees doesn't necessarily help as much, but underneath your thigh means, okay, cool, I don't have to work as hard to be here, okay? And that allows you to sit a little bit more comfortably longer. And if you've watched my video about how to get up from the floor without using your hands, having those blocks there, right, you have something more to sort of push off of, right, can help you in that way. So that's kind of a bonus, is having those blocks underneath your thighs gives you a little bonus. Now, if you don't have these yoga type props, you can certainly use other things like couch cushions. They're not as firm. I mean, these are pretty firm. They're not as firm as like blocks are. They're not as hard, but they work in the same way. So I'm going to grab one for underneath my hips, and I will sit on that. And because it's a little bit soft, because, like it's not giving me as much support, like it's going to help tilt me forward. And you can even see that it's like puffing up in the back a little bit. It's going to give me a little, but not quite as much. So I can take these other ones and slide them, these other pillows. These are pillows. I was like, these are not blocks. These other pillows underneath your legs. Oh, and now you've got this like, ooh, really cushy kind of seat here on the floor. And again, I'll turn forward so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so with these lovely pillows underneath my thighs, it feels really, really nice. And these, to be honest, feel a lot nicer than the blocks. They don't give you as much support if you're trying to like come up to stand without using your hands because they're not as firm, but they feel really nice. Okay, so prop yourself up. Now, you could also use, in addition to, like these the pillows, the soft blocks, the pillows are great for underneath your knees as well as the blocks, but you could also use a block underneath your hips. And this too is a reminder that you can be as high up as you need to be, right? Like you could use that block and have your ankles crossed, and that actually tilts your pelvis even more forward. Okay, because the idea really is that when your knees are higher up than your hips, that's when it starts to feel uncomfortable, and that's when your body will start to round back. But if you can get your knees moving either in line with the very top of your pelvis, so if you find like the pokey bone in the front and the top of your pelvis, that's your ilium, okay, the wings of your pelvis, you can find it. Everybody's got it, I promise. Okay, maybe not everyone, but as far as I know, everybody does. Okay, but you got your ilium, okay. That pokey bone, if your thigh is lower than that, it's going to feel a lot more spacious. Okay, if your knee is lower than that, it's going to feel a lot more spacious for your knees, for your hips, and for your low back all around. Okay, so I'm going to turn forward so you can see what that cross-legged seat would look like when I'm sitting up on a block. A little bit different, right? No matter which ankle is crossed in front, I have a tendency to cross my right ankle in front. It's just the dominant way that I do it. That's another thing to pay attention to. It's another thing that will help your hips, okay? So those are the ways that you can make it easier to sit cross-legged comfortably on the floor. You could also sit kneeling on the floor. This can be a little bit harder on some people's knees, but you could use the blocks here as well and just have the blocks as high up as you want. Ooh, that's pretty high. I had it much higher than I meant, right? But here I am. That gives my knees a little bit more space, okay? You could have it at the middle height. Okay, so this is just another way to sit on the ground. Again, this one tends to be a little bit harder on the knees. So if you have more knee sensitivity, having that cross-legged seat usually feels a little bit better. But sitting in this way with your knees together, with your thighs together and your knees forward, that's for some people a little bit nicer on their knees because it's less external rotation, and so it feels better on the knee joints. So it kind of depends on what you need. For that one, it's pretty simple, right? You just put it underneath your hips and sit, okay? So now that we've gotten all that out of the way, some of the things will help you sit on the floor more comfortably are just some basic hip mobility exercises. So for example, you can come up to stand and just place one hand at a wall, lift your left leg up, and just roll some circles, meaning your left knee goes up, out to the side, back, around, and forward again. Okay, just a few of those. You go in both directions. And notice that that place where my knee is out to the side, you can keep going. When my knee is out to the side, it's the same shape as that cross-legged seat. Okay, switch sides. Okay, so if you need to go to the wall again, left hand goes to the wall and just do some of those hip circles. Okay, it's just a nice basic way, go the other direction, to create a little bit more mobility in your hip. Now you could also do this sitting down. So here I am sitting on my couch. I can lean a little bit to the side or lean all the way down, lift my left leg up and roll some circles here. Okay, go to the other side, same jam, right? Circles on the couch. So if you're working on building up mobility and balance is really challenging, or you really want to work on the mobility from a seated place, doing it seated works as well. Now, another great pose to help create more strength and mobility in your hips is to start with a wide stance. Turn your right foot out, left foot stays just as it is, so it's parallel to the back edge of your mat. Bend your right knee, hips go down. And then all you would do here is turn your thigh out and turn it in. Turn your thigh out and turn it in. And the knee is not doing the work for you here, it's your hip. Thigh goes out, thigh goes in, thigh goes out, thigh goes in. Okay, a few more times. Thigh goes out and in. Okay, and then you switch sides. Okay, so turn your right foot in, left foot out, bend your knee. Right, same deal. Thigh goes out, thigh goes in. Okay, and if you need support here, you could pretend this is a chair. I'm stacking it up as high as I can. You could put a chair in front of you. Right, thigh goes out, thigh goes in. And that's just an easy way, simple way to create more mobility in your hip. Now the last way, and this would not be sitting on the floor, you could do this sitting on a couch, since I happen to have one, is to take your left leg up. You can grab a hold of your foot. If you can't grab a hold of your foot, that's also fine. You could use a belt. I have my shirt. Okay, so if you can't grab a hold of your foot, you could loop something around your foot and then cross your ankle, left ankle on top of your right knee, and just hold here. Now I'm going to get a little closer to the camera so that you can see what this looks like. Okay, but all I'm doing is this seated figure 4 thing. Okay, and I'm going to do this on the other side closer to the camera so you can see, but what this does, it creates a lot of external hip rotation, very similar to what you do in a seated pose on the ground. Okay, so you can do the second side. So right ankle would go on top of your left knee. Like I said, I'm going to get a little bit closer so you can see. Right ankle on top of left knee. This is what it looks like. Okay, if I was sitting all the way down. Okay, you could certainly do this not sitting on a couch. You could certainly do this, sitting in a chair. You could do it standing like I just did. Okay, so you can remove your right ankle from your left knee, but those are 3 things that I would recommend doing to help create a little bit more movement in your hips so that when you come down to sit on the floor, whether you're using props or not, you can sit with a little bit more ease and comfort. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful, and I hope that it gives you just a little bit more of an idea of how to support yourself on the ground in a seated position with props and without. So thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you back on the mat again really soon. Until then, bye everyone.